He told the banished princess she belonged. Now the galaxy stands in awe. Funny thing, the human said, wiping his hands on a rag as he stared at the alien in front of him. Back on Earth, people would call you devastating. Out here, sounds like their emperor's just scared of anything that doesn't fit his furniture. He flashed a crooked grin at the recording drone hovering above his shoulder. If you like stories where humans ruin imperial nonsense with basic decency, don't forget to follow along. Now, let's rewind to the moment everything broke and started to work. Sparks drifted through the dim air of the workshop, blinking out against walls stained with years of smoke and welding. Rian Cole, frontier mechanic, part-time scavenger, full-time miracle worker, leaned over a cracked gravitic stabilizer, chewing on the inside of his cheek as the machine wheezed. Don't die on me, he muttered. I already promised your captain you'd last another season. The stabilizer coughed, then went dark. Behind him, the air snapped. It was subtle at first, a shimmer in the corner of his vision, like heat above sand. Then a column of pale blue light knifed down from nothing, reality folding in on itself with a sound like distant thunder heard underwater. Rian straightened, squinting through the glare. Out of the light stepped a woman. Her skin was a deep teal, patterned with faint silver lines that pulsed like buried starlight. Wide shoulders, thick thighs, strong arms. Her ceremonial harness of woven metal and silk dug into soft curves that were clearly not meant for heavy gravity. The moment her boots hit the stained workshop floor, she flinched at the grit, eyes darting around like she'd landed in a landfill. Behind her hovered a towering hollow projection of an alien figure, tall, robed, crown blazing with cold gems. The crest of the Ilarian dominion gleamed over his heart. Human! The projected voice boomed, vibrating through Rian's ribs. You are Rian Cole. Mechanic. Scrapper. Resident of this outpost. Yeah, Rian said slowly, wiping his hands. Welcome to dockside repairs. Mind the tools. And the occasional explosion. The Emperor, Archon Kaler, if Rian remembered his news feeds right, didn't acknowledge the joke. I present my daughter, the projection declared, each word iced with contempt. High Scion Larixa Kale of House Kala. She has failed to meet the physical and aesthetic standards of her station. She is excess. She will learn restraint among your kind. The woman stiffened, jaw flexing. She said nothing. The column of light flickered. The Archon's projection faded, eyes like frozen stars locked on his daughter until the last instant, and then he was gone. The portal collapsed with a soft pop, the workshop falling abruptly silent except for the slow tick of cooling metal. Larixa stood alone in the middle of Rian's chaos. For a heartbeat, either of them moved. Then Rian scratched his cheek with the rag and glanced around at the hanging cables, piles of stripped ship parts, and the battered coffee machine that wheezed in the corner. He said. So. Welcome to Kestrel Outpost. Population, poor decisions, and whatever that thing outside is leaking. Her eyes, bright, crystalline green, narrowed slightly. You do not kneel, she said. Her voice was deep, smooth, and strained. Rian snorted. I only kneel for machines I can't fix and people who saved my life. You're new here. Jury's out. Her stare sharpened, then, very faintly, the corner of her mouth twitched, like a smile she didn't trust. Larixa Kale had been prepared for humiliation. Her father's court had buzzed the moment the sentence was pronounced. You could hear it under the polite phrases, beneath the tight smiles of the nobles, relief that the joke wasn't on them. Sending her to a scrap world? One minister had whispered as she was escorted toward the transit gate. At least out there, her scale might be useful. Humans won't care, another had murmured. They breed in clutter. She'd kept her posture rigid, head high, until the gate flared and swallowed the throne room behind her. The light burned. Gravities shifted. And then she was here, in a place that smelled like oil, ozone, and burned coffee. Larixa glanced down at her ornate harness. The metal there had been designed to dazzle ballrooms, not brush up against dangling power cables and shelves of mismatched bolts. The floor vibrated with some distant engine. A small wheelbot shaped vaguely like a dog rolled by, bumped her ankle, chirped an apology, and whirred away, leaving a trail of dust. Rian watched her like a man who just found an alien artifact in his kitchen. Right, he said. You probably need somewhere to sit that isn't a crate of rusting fuel injectors. He tossed the rag, grabbed a stack of parts off a nearby chair, and gestured toward the stairs at the back of the workshop. Got a spare room upstairs. Used to store junk. I can evict the junk. You can be my first non-human tenant. Comes with a view of the yard. That's what I call the majestic field of dead starship guts out back. She frowned. You, live above your machines? Cheaper that way, he said, starting up the narrow steps without waiting. And when a reactor core decides to throw a tantrum at 4 a.m, I can fix it before it kills anyone I like. She followed slowly, gown brushing against scarred railings. The steps creaked under her weight. Larixa winced at the sound, shoulders curling inward. On the landing, her sleeves snagged on a protruding bolt. The fabric tore with an ugly rip. She hissed a curse in Illyrian, yanking it free. Rian glanced back. That bolt's been trying to kill me for months, he said. Good. Now it's tasted royal blood, maybe it'll calm down. The look she gave him was so incredulous it was almost funny. Almost. He opened a door and stepped aside. The room was small. A narrow bed. A dented metal trunk. A tiny desk under a window looking out over a junkyard of ships slowly being cannibalized for parts. The air smelled faintly of solder, metal filings, and stale coffee. It is. Larixa searched for a word that was not insult. Functional. Rian scratched his neck. It's not what you're used to. No, she said softly, fingers brushing the bed frame. Nothing about this is what I am used to. She sat. The bed groaned. Larixa froze, mortified, every instinct screaming at her to stand and disappear into the floor. Rian lifted both hands like he was calming a skittish engine. Easy. That bed's older than half the ships I work on. I keep saying I'll reinforce the frame, and then something else explodes first. That creak wasn't you. That was time and poor manufacturing. She stared at him, waiting for the punchline, the smirk, the dig. It didn't come. You are not required to comfort me, she said tightly. I am aware of what I am. He leaned on the doorframe, eyes steady. Yeah, he said. You're someone who deserves a better damn bed. Her breath caught. Not because it was poetic. It wasn't. It was simple, clumsy. But it was the first time in a long time anyone had spoken about her body without making it a crime. Larixa did not sleep well. The mattress complained every time she shifted. The building itself seemed to breathe, metal expanding and contracting with temperature, pipes gurgling, the distant boom of late-night landings shaking dust from the ceiling. When dawn seeped in, red and thin through the dirty window, she gave up on rest entirely. Illyrian mornings had begun with attendance, measured meals, and scheduled courtyard walks designed to make her appear smaller in public. Here, there was just a cold floor and the faint scent of something burned, embedded into the walls. She decided she would at least make herself useful. Human cooking, she reasoned, could not be more complex than palace nutrient protocols. 20 minutes later, Rian woke to the smell of smoke. He bolted upright, tripped over his tool bag, and thundered down the stairs half in his coveralls, heart in his throat. Please don't be the stabilizer, he muttered. Please don't be the... He skidded to a stop. Larixa stood in the middle of the workshop, holding a frying pan at arm's length over a portable stove. Something black and unrecognizable sizzled angrily in the center. I attempted to prepare your morning sustenance, she said stiffly. The egg resisted. Rian stared. What did it ever do to you? She pointed at the knob. I set it to maximum, as per Illyrian heat standards. It appears human food objects do not withstand proper thermal discipline. Yeah, we usually don't start at melt the hull, he said, gently relieving her of the pan and switching off the burner. You trying to cook breakfast or forge weapons? Her shoulders slumped. I wish to contribute. To prove I am not merely taking space. He glanced at her, then at the black disk in the pan. First, this is on me, he said. Should have labeled that setting do not use unless you hate cookware. Second, if you really want to contribute, the coffee maker is the true god of this place. He dumped the ruined egg, grabbed a fresh one, and cracked it into the pan. The sizzle this time was gentle, the smell warm instead of acrid. Larixa folded her arms, watching closely. You cook, she said, as if she'd found a contradiction. Only when I want to stay alive, he said, flipping the egg. Other days I let the snack dispenser win. She eyed the toast as he slid it onto a cracked plate and smeared a thick layer of bright red jam over the surface. What is that? She asked. Strawberry jam, he said. It's sugar, fruit, and childhood happiness mashed into a jar. That sounds inefficient. Try it. She picked up the toast reluctantly, sniffed it, then took a careful bite. Her eyes widened. It is sweet, she murmured, expression cracking into something almost childlike. Sharp. Warm. Simple. Rian leaned on the counter, watching her expression transform. We've got 3 jars left in storage, he said. If you like it, I'll stop trading it for ship parts and start trading ship parts for more of it. Her tendril-like hair frills twitched with obvious delight before she caught herself and forced them still. It is acceptable, she said, attempting nonchalance. He grinned. That's the highest praise I've heard in weeks. For a few minutes, they just ate, human mechanic and exiled alien heir sharing toast over a workbench stained with years of grease. The scene was ridiculous. It also felt weirdly right. The days began to settle into something that resembled a rhythm. Larixa insisted on helping in the workshop despite Rian's half-hearted protests. She changed out of her ceremonial harness into a set of old coveralls he dug out of storage. They were too short in the legs and tight across her chest, but she wore them like armor. You don't have to do this, he told her on the 3rd day, as she sorted cables by gauge and typed with terrifying precision. Yes, she said without looking up. I do. Ineffective things are discarded in my father's court. I will not be ineffective. You're on Kestrel now, he said. We keep broken things and yell at them until they work again. You'll fit right in. She paused at that. Considered it. Then nodded once. It turned out she had an instinct for circuits. Her long fingers moved quickly, assembling boards faster than his repair drones ever managed. Larixa's people, she explained, interfaced with organic energy systems, living crystal, bioresponsive metals. Translating that knowledge to human tech made her frown in concentration but never stop. Sometimes she forgot her own strength. The first time she tried to lift a decommissioned generator to save time, the entire workbench folded in half with a horrifying crunch. Both of them stared at the wreckage. Well, Rian said slowly, brushing dust from her shoulder. That bench had a good run. Her cheeks darkened in mortification. I am heavy-handed. That was a compliment where I grew up, he said. Also, I've been meaning to upgrade the bench. You just gave me an excuse to build an Illyrian-proof frame. Her lips twitched. Reinforced for defects. For power, he corrected. I don't build around weaknesses. I build around realities. In the evenings, when he shut down the main lights, they would sit on the narrow metal balcony that overlooked the scrapyard. The stars out here were sharp, almost violent in their clarity. Far from the psalm of the Dominion's core worlds, the sky felt bigger. More honest. Larixa would lean on the rail, arms folded, gaze tilted upward. Do you miss it? Rian asked one night, nursing a chipped mug of coffee. Home? Larixa was quiet for a long time. I miss the idea of it, she said finally. The capital is beautiful. Towers of singing crystal. Gardens woven from light. But all of it is built for one shape. One image. Everything curved, slender, efficient. My sisters fit that world. I did not. Sounds boring, he said. She shot him a look. Perfection is not boring. It is desirable. Nah, he said. Perfection is sterile. You ever notice how perfect things don't leave room for anyone else? Out here, stuff is crooked and patched and half broken. Leaves lots of space to wedge yourself in. You think I should wedge myself into your scrapyard? She said, skeptical. I think, he replied, that if a culture can't figure out how to appreciate someone who looks like you, the culture's stupid. Her throat tightened. You speak as though my mass is not an embarrassment. He shrugged. Looks like you could carry 2 people out of a burning ship without breaking a sweat. Where I'm from, that's about as far from embarrassing as it gets. Something warm and unfamiliar flickered in her chest. She looked away quickly, pretending to study a distant hauler lifting off the pad. You are very careless with your words, Rian Cole, she said. Yeah, he agreed. But I've found saying the honest one saves time. The settlement noticed her. You couldn't miss Larixa, even in coveralls. She was taller than most humans, broader across the shoulders, her skin glowing faintly where the silver lines under it pulsed in time with some inner rhythm. Kids stared eyes wide. Adults pretended not to, then did it anyway. Rian introduced her as LYR, because out here people kept names short or they didn't use them. She's helping me keep the station from falling apart, he'd add. Be nice. She can throw a fuel cell farther than you. Most people laughed. Some didn't. One evening, just before station dusk, 2 freelance haulers wandered into the workshop, smelling of cheap distillate and old sweat. They leaned against the counter while Larixa cataloged parts in the background, eyes fixed straight ahead. So, one drawled, eyeing her up and down. That the Archon's cast-off? His partner snickered. Heard rumors. Didn't realize they were underestimating. That's a lot of royal material. Heat flooded Larix's face. Old instincts flared, shrink, withdraw, disappear. Rian looked up from the grav coupling he was cleaning. You boys need a part? He asked, voice pleasantly neutral. Or a long walk into the sun? They smirked. Relax, the first one said. Just making conversation. Didn't think the stories about the fat princess were real. Rian set the coupling down very carefully. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Say that again, he said. In my shop. So I can decide whether to charge you double, or just stop doing business with you entirely. There was iron under the casual tone. Larixa felt it like a current. The hauler held up his hands. Easy. Didn't mean offense. Yeah, you did, Rian said. But I'm going to pretend you're smarter than your mouth and let you leave. Without the discount. They laughed it off and stumbled toward the door. Larixa stared at the floor, fists clenched so tight her knuckles ached. You did not have to. Yeah, I did, Rian cut in. No one gets to come in here and treat someone in my crew like scrap. Not while I'm breathing. She looked at him then, truly looked. You call me crew, she said slowly. Would you prefer assistant? He asked. I've always wanted to yell at someone and say this is my chief engineer, respect the title. Her lips curved, reluctant but real. You are infuriating. Top of my resume, he said lightly. That night, as he closed up, he caught sight of her reflection in the upstairs window, standing in front of the little metal desk, shoulders not quite as hunched, chin lifted a fraction higher. Maybe, he thought, tightening a bolt with unnecessary care, he wasn't just fixing machines anymore. By the second week, Larixa had claimed a section of the main workbench. Rian started referring to it as LYR's corner. Larixa, not wanting anything that sounded sentimental, labeled it Station Node 3 in his inventory system. It didn't matter what she called it. Everyone who came in knew whose space it was. On it, they began to build something that shouldn't exist. The problem started as a joke. Rian complained one night that Kestrel's shield grid flickered every time someone sneezed too hard in orbit. Your Dominion has fancy organic fields that drink solar wind for breakfast, he said. We've got plates bolted onto rebar and prayers. There's got to be a middle ground. Larixa frowned thoughtfully. In theory, Illyrian phase crystal could harmonize with your crude coil systems. But no one integrates our structures with human tech. Our standards are pure. Sure, he said. Or maybe they're just lazy. He shoved a crate of parts toward her. Show me what in theory looks like. What started as idle tinkering became an obsession. Larixa sketched designs on old mylar sheets and Rian's shoulders. He'd be mid-nap and wake up with lines drawn in grease on his arm and her voice muttering about resonance angles. You can't just jam a phase lattice into a human coil, he'd argue. You can't, she'd counter, stabbing a diagram. If you treat it like a living organ, not a battery. He understood stubborn hardware. She understood stubborn energy. Between the two of them, the impossible slowly became probable. One evening, as station night hummed outside, they stood shoulder to shoulder over the prototype shield core. Larixa's hand hovered over the activation panel. If this detonates, she said calmly, I will inform the afterlife that it was your idea. If this detonates, the afterlife's going to get a lot of new customers, Rian replied. Hit it. Their fingers brushed as they reached for the control at the same time. The core thrummed. Blue-white light folded in on itself, twisting through the lattice of Illyrian crystal and human metal. The air rippled. Tools rattled on hooks. For a heartbeat, Rian forgot to breathe. Then the hum settled into a steady, resonant purr. Larixa stared. It stabilized, she whispered. Told you it would, he said, exhaling shakily. I had like 80% faith. You told me you were certain. Yeah, well, the other 20% was ready to run. She laughed, full, surprised, delighted. He turned to look at her, and caught more than just triumph in her face. Confidence had crept in, somewhere between broken bench and working prototype. She looked like someone who had just proven a lifetime of insults wrong and hadn't yet figured out what to do with that victory. It is pleasant, she said slowly, to be useful for more than absorbing ridicule. Rian frowned. You were always useful. You just weren't in the right place to show it. They celebrated the first successful test the only way they could: instant noodles, the last packet of strawberry jam, and music from Rian's battered radio. I will prepare the food, Larixa announced, rolling up her sleeves with ceremonial seriousness. This time, I will not carbonize anything. Low bar, but I support it, Rian said, setting water to boil. She watched him measure out sauce and spices, then took the spoon from his hand. You do not have a monopoly on basic competence, she said, nudging him aside. He leaned against the counter, watching as she carefully stirred, brow furrowed in intense concentration. When she managed not to burn the noodles and portion them into mismatched bowls, she held hers aloft like a trophy. Look, she said. I have produced edible matter. Gourmet, he said gravely. 5 stars. Would survive apocalypse with you. Her frills shimmered happily. As they ate, rain began to drum on the metal roof. Storms rolled over Kestrel sheets, turning the junkyard into a maze of reflections. The shield core prototype, humming quietly in its frame, kept the workshop lights solid while the town's grid flickered and groaned. Larixa sat near the open door, watching the rain fall through the steady dome of invisible force that extended just far enough to keep the threshold dry. On Illyria, she said softly, storms are choreographed. Weather is shaped for parades, not truth. Truth tends to rust things, Rian said. Palaces hate rust. She glanced at him. My father used to say that anything uncontrolled was dangerous. That includes people who refuse to fit the pattern. Your father sounds exhausting, he said. No offense to the giant man with an army. She huffed something that was almost a laugh. It is treason to agree with you. Lightning flashed, lighting up her face. She didn't look fragile in that moment, or wrong or excessive. She looked like she belonged next to thunder. Lyr, he said quietly. What happens if he calls you back? She stared out at the rain. He will not, she said. This exile was meant to be permanent. Out of sight, out of court, out of conversation. And if he changes his mind? Then, she said, voice low, I will tell him I am busy. He barked a laugh. With what? She gestured toward the shield core, the flickering hollow schematics pinned to the wall, the mess that had become their shared work. Rewriting failure into function, she said. Beginning with myself. He swallowed. For a heartbeat, the air between them felt as charged as the storm. He opened his mouth, a reckless thought half formed on his tongue. The station alarm cut in, shrill and insistent. Incoming priority transmission, the automated voice droned. Origin, Illyrian Dominion Core. Authorization, Archon level. Larixa went very still. Her bowl slipped from her fingers and hit the floor. The message crystal hovered over the workbench like a tiny sun, casting pale light over scattered tools and grease-streaked diagrams. Larixa stared at it without touching. Could be spam, Rian offered. Maybe he's trying to sell you extended warranty on your disgrace. She didn't smile. Illyrian law, she said quietly. When the Archon calls, you answer or you forfeit all rights to speak again. That is dark, Rian muttered. Okay. So we answer. She reached out, fingers shaking, and tapped the crystal. Light flared, resolving into a head and shoulders projection of Archon Kaler. He looked as he had the day he'd exiled her, sharp-cheeked, elegant, carved from disapproval. Hi Scion Larixa, he said. Report. Not a greeting. A command. Larixa swallowed. Her throat felt tight, her earlier confidence shrunk down to a hard knot in her chest. As ordered, she said. I have adapted to the conditions on Kestrel Outpost. I am contributing to. I did not ask if you have learned to haul scrap, he said, cutting her off. I asked for evidence that your time among primitives has not been entirely wasted. Rian's jaw tightened. Larixa's hands curled. She glanced sideways at the shield core. We have constructed a hybrid defense grid, she said. It stabilizes using Illyrian phase crystal and human coil architecture. It functions at 93% efficiency with minimal. The Archon's mouth twisted. A machine built out of salvage and superstition. You expect me to be impressed? No, Rian said, stepping into the projections field. She expects you to listen, which, judging by your track record, is asking a lot. The Archon's gaze snapped to him. You are the human mechanic, he said, the word mechanic dripping like oil. You address me as someone who dumped his own daughter on a junk rock, Rian said. Yeah, I know who I'm talking to. Larixa inhaled sharply. Rian. It's fine, he said, eyes not leaving the projection. He can't vaporize me through a crystal. I checked. The Archon's expression froze into icy disdain. You presume much. Yeah, Rian said. I presume that if you had half a brain for engineering instead of image, you'd realize she just did something your guild said was impossible. He jerked a thumb toward Larixa, who was now staring at him like he'd lost his mind. She's brilliant. You called her excessive. Out here, we call that capacity. Silence pulsed. Larixa's heart pounded so loud she could hear it. The Archon's gaze slid back to his daughter. You allow this thing to speak for you? He asked. No, Larixa said quietly. Her voice surprised even herself. He speaks with me. She drew herself up, shoulders back. You wish for proof of my progress, she said. I will send you the full technical schematics of our shield. You may review them. Or you may ignore them and remain weaker than you believe yourself to be. Your choice. For an instant, something like shock flickered across Kayla's face. You are insolent, he said at last. I am accurate, she replied. His eyes hardened. Very well. Enjoy your dirt, Larixa Kale. You have chosen it over marble. The projection snapped out. The crystal dropped to the table with a flat clink. Rian exhaled. Well, he said. That went better than expected? Larixa sank onto a stool, legs trembling. I spoke to him as if he were She searched for the word. Fallible. News flash, Rian said. He is. Her hands shook. He didn't try to touch her. He just sat down on the floor beside her, back against the same workbench, eyes on the humming core, letting the quiet settle between them until her breathing steadied. Rian, she said hoarsely, you could be punished for speaking to him like that. He shrugged. He already doesn't care if I live or die. Might as well make it interesting. 3 days. That was how long it took for the Dominion to answer. On the morning of the 4th, Kestrel's sky turned the wrong color. A sheet of shimmering green spread across the upper atmosphere as a sleek, silver ship cut down through the clouds like a blade. The entire settlement went quiet. Rian stepped out onto the packed dirt lot in front of the workshop, wiping his hands on a rag that would never be clean again, and squinted up at the descending craft. That's not a courier, he muttered. Larixa joined him, jaw clenched. That is an envoy barge, she said. My father is sending representatives. I was hoping for a fruit basket, Rian said. But sure. Threat delegation it is. The barge landed with a controlled thud that rattled the workshop's windows. Dust swirled. Curious locals gathered in clusters at a carefully safe distance. The ramp hissed down. 2 Illyrian envoys emerged, tall and narrow, encased in ceremonial armor polished to a mirror sheen. Between them floated a hollow emblem of the Dominion crest, spinning slowly like a threat dressed as a decoration. A third figure followed, the Archon's image, projected full body this time, looming several heads taller than anyone else. Larixa's hands trembled at her sides. She wore coveralls, grease on one sleeve, hair frills pulled back with a piece of stripped wiring. She suddenly felt very, very small. Daughter, the Archon said, the word blade sharp. You have been busy. Larixa forced her chin up. I have been working. You have been wallowing, he said. Look at you. Dressed in rags, drenched in foreign stench, still taking up too much. Rian's teeth ground together. He leaned closer, voice low. You don't have to do this alone. She gave the smallest nod. Father, she said louder. You wish for proof of my progress. It stands behind you. The Archon turned, gaze landing on the humming core array hooked into Kestrel's rusty shield pylons. Blue-white energy pulsed through the coils, a visible lace of controlled power racing out toward the settlement. One envoy sniffed. A toy built on dirt. Rian stepped forward, hands in his pockets. Funny toy then, he said. Keeps meteors off your daughter's head. Would your palace do the same? The Archon's glare snapped back to him. You overstep, human. That's kind of our thing, Rian said. We overstep. We also fix what you throw away. A murmur rippled through the watching locals. Larixa's heart hammered, but something in her uncoiled. I am not broken, she said loudly enough that people at the back of the crowd turned. You called me unfit. You said my body made our house look weak. Out here, this body walks through storms, lifts generators, and builds what your perfect daughters never tried. Her voice shook, but it did not break. The Archon's eyes flashed. You shame yourself. No, Rian cut in. She shames you. That's different. The envoy to the Archon's left stepped forward, armor whispering. Sire, she said tightly. Permission to silence this. No, Kayla said, never taking his eyes off Rian. Let him finish hanging himself. Already did that last week with faulty wiring, Rian said. Didn't stick. Listen. You think she's a flaw because she doesn't fit the lines you like to draw. But your lines don't keep anyone alive. This does. He strode to the control console beside the shield core. Everyone off the grid. He called toward the crowd. Cut main power. Kestrel's old street lamps flickered out. Storefronts dimmed to black. The settlement held its breath. Rian slapped his palm onto the activation pad. The core roared. Energy surged through the array. Pillars around the settlement flared to life, arcs of light leaping from one to the next in a web of crackling brilliance. Above them, The faint shimmer of a dome coalesced, catching dust and light in a glowing shell. Lamps blinked back on, brighter than before. Houses hummed. The workshop's tool screens came alive, clearer than they'd ever been. The crowd gasped. The envoys shielded their eyes from the sudden radiance. The Archon took a step back, projecting flickering at the edges as the shield's energy washed over him. "It ties into your own lattice signatures," Larixa said steadily. "See?" She moved past Rian, laying her hand flat against one of the glowing pylons. The silver lines under her skin flared in sync with the core, light running up her arms in seamless harmony. "This array listens to Illyrian frequency and human chaos," she said. "It balances both. It protects everyone equally. It is stability born of difference, not uniformity." Rian watched her, throat tight. Archon Kayla stared, expression cracking at the edges. "You built this," he said slowly. "With him." "Yes," Larixa said. "Because you were wrong about me." Murmurs rippled again. Faces in the crowd turned from curiosity to something sharper: respect, awe, a kind of fierce pride that wasn't entirely theirs but felt like it anyway. The Archon's jaw clenched. "And you choose to stand here," he said, "in rags, in grease, in filth, rather than return to your rightful place?" Larixa met his gaze without flinching. "My rightful place," she said, "is wherever I am allowed to exist as myself. That has never been your court." The air felt electric. The envoys shifted uneasily, clearly not used to watching their ruler be defied in public, much less on a dirt-ball fringe colony. "Your mass, your lack of discipline," the Archon said, as if repeating a familiar script might pull things back into orbit. "These make you a liability." Larixa almost smiled. "The shield would not function without my mass," she said. "My resonance is what anchors the phase field. My so-called excess is the very thing that makes it work." Rian couldn't help it. He grinned, wide and a little vicious. "You built an empire on looking pretty," he said. "She just built something that might keep it from getting blown up. I know which one I'd choose." "You would choose mud," Kayla snapped. "I'd choose reality," Rian replied. Silence stretched. Finally, the Archon turned fully toward his daughter. "You defy me publicly," he said. "You link your name with the humans. You attach your work to a gutter outpost. If you stay here, Larixa Kale, you are no longer of my house. You will be cut from the line." Larixa's chest tightened. Once, that threat had hung over her like a blade. Losing her family name meant losing protection, privilege, recognition. It meant becoming no one. Now she stood in front of a humming shield array that pulsed with the rhythm of her own body. At her side stood a human who had called her enough before she'd believed it. For the first time in her life, the choice felt simple. "Then cut me," she said quietly. "I am not your ornament. I'm not your joke. I will not shrink to make your house look taller." The crowd sucked in a collective breath. Rian stared at her, heart pounding so hard it hurt. The Archon's projection flickered. "You would exile yourself," he said slowly. "No," Larixa replied. "You exiled me once. This time, I am choosing my home." Behind her, Kestrel hummed. Lights shone in windows built from scrap and stubbornness. Kids peered over railings. Traders leaned against doors. A sign over the workshop door, freshly painted by some anonymous hand, read Coal and Kale Systems in crooked lettering. Rian hadn't seen it until that moment. The sight made his throat burn. Archon Kayla stared at his daughter, at the shield, at the humans watching him with wary, challenging eyes. Finally, he drew himself up. "So be it," he said. "Larixa Kale, by your words, you remove yourself from House Kayla. You are no longer mine." The old pain bit deep. But beneath it was something else. Something new. A quiet, stubborn joy. She bowed, not the shallow, deferential tilt expected by court, but a warrior's salute offered to a worthy opponent. "I was never really yours," she said. The projection flickered and vanished. The envoys hesitated, clearly waiting for a recall order that didn't come. One of them glared at Rian. "This insult will be remembered," she said coldly. Rian shrugged. "Good. Would hate to think you went through all this trouble and forgot me." They retreated to their barge. Engines flared. The ship ascended, shrinking into a point of light, then nothing. For a moment, Kestrel was utterly silent. Then someone started clapping. The applause started hesitantly, from one of the mechanics who rented half a rack in Rian's back room. Then the baker. Then the kids who'd been sneaking looks all morning. Within seconds, the whole crowd was clapping, cheering, whistling. Larixa just stood there, shell-shocked. Rian moved closer, voice low. "You with me?" he asked. Her eyes were very bright. "I believe so." "Good," he said. "Because that was intense as hell, and if I'm the only one who felt it, I'll be offended." She laughed, a broken, breathless sound that turned genuine halfway through. "He disowned me," she said. The words should have hurt more than they did. "Yeah," Rian said. "And an entire settlement saw you tell him no. The term you're looking for is uprated." Lights from the shield domed over them, turning dust motes into tiny comets. The air smelled like ozone and potential. Larixa exhaled, long and shaky. "I feel lighter," she admitted. "Funny," he said. "You just stepped out from under a mountain of expectations. Weight loss checks out." She elbowed him in the ribs. He grunted. "Ow. Okay, maybe don't make weight jokes." "Noted." "You are impossible," she said, but there was warmth under it. The crowd began to disperse, chatter buzzing in a way Kestrel had never quite known before. Someone slapped Rian on the back. Another called up to Larixa. "Nice work, engineer." Engineer. Not princess. Not insult. Engineer. Something in her chest unclenched. Later, when they finally staggered back inside, Rian leaned against the closed door, sliding down until he sat on the floor. "I need a nap," he said. "And maybe a new spine." That much adrenaline can't be good for lumbar support. Larixa stood in the center of the workshop, hands hovering over the still humming core. "He called me no longer his," she said softly. Rian pushed himself up, stepped close enough to touch her if he wanted to. "Question," he said. "Do you want to be his?" She thought about marble floors. Tight clothes designed to hide her shape. Whispered comments she wasn't meant to hear. The taste of meals measured in shame. Then she thought about strawberry jam. The weight of tools in her hands. The feel of a shield core settling into stability under her touch. A human man looking her straight in the eye and saying you're enough. "No," she said. "I do not." "Then congratulations," he said. "You just got promoted. No more being part of someone else's brand. You're your own." His eyes, when she looked up, were intense. Serious in a way his mouth rarely was. "Lyr," he said quietly. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you're here." Her pulse jumped. "I am glad you are you," she replied, because eloquence had left the building. He huffed a laugh. "That's a terrifying compliment, but I'll take it." The shield hummed above the settlement that night, deflecting the tail of a debris storm with lazy arcs of light no one inside could feel. Kestrel celebrated in the only way it knew how: too much food, bad music, cheap fireworks, and entirely unnecessary dancing. People brought dishes to the workshop lot, setting up tables between crates of ship parts. Kids ran under the glowing pylons, shrieking as the static lifted their hair. Someone started playing an old earth guitar. Someone else synced a hollow emitter to Illyrian chant rhythms. It was chaotic and imperfect. Larixa loved it. She and Rian sat on the steps of the workshop, sharing a battered mug of strong coffee that neither actually needed but both kept sipping to have something to do with their hands. "You realize your father is probably furious beyond reason right now," Rian said, watching the shield glint in the sky. "Let him be," she said. "He wanted me erased. Instead, my name will be on every design schematic that crosses his desk." He raised the mug in a mock toast. To spite-fueled progress. She clinked her side against his. To humans who cannot stop talking. He grinned. That might be carved on my grave someday. Not if I reinforce your shielding properly, she said. You are too useful to lose. The band, or collective of vaguely in-time participants, shifted to a slower rhythm. Under the lights, couples began to sway. Not always gracefully. Never mind. Larixa watched them, something tight and hesitant unfurling in her chest. Rian, she said quietly. Among humans, does standing against an empire with someone mean you are? She searched for a diplomatic term. Entangled. He choked on his coffee. Sometimes, he said, after recovering. Sometimes it just means we're idiots. Sometimes it means we care. Which is this? She asked. He looked at her. Really looked. In the glow from the pylons, her skin was a galaxy of shifting light. She looked tired, fierce, bewildered, and alive. This is me, he said slowly. Caring about someone who deserved better a long damn time ago. Her breath stuttered. And if we were Illyrian? She asked, needing to understand. What would this be? He smiled faintly. I don't know. I don't speak terrible court politics. I speak I like you, I'm an idiot, and I'd really like to kiss you if it won't get me vaporized. That is a very inefficient language, she whispered. Yeah, he said. Does the job, though. He didn't move closer. He waited. We do not vaporize for that, she said, heart hammering. On Illyria. Kissing. It is allowed. Good to know, he murmured. He reached up, slow enough for her to stop him, and brushed his fingers along her jaw. Her skin was warm. The silver lines beneath her flesh brightened, responding to contact. You can tell me no, he said. I will not, she replied. When their mouths met, the kiss was gentle at first, uncertain. Then some invisible tension snapped. She leaned into him, strong hands catching at his coveralls, pulling him closer with care she would never have used on a fragile thing she didn't value. The shield core pulsed. Light rippled across the dome above them, brightening for a heartbeat like the system was responding to their combined resonance. Someone in the crowd cheered. Rian laughed into the kiss, breathless. Pretty sure, he said when they parted, foreheads touching. We just overclocked the grid. That, she murmured, was an efficient use of energy. In the weeks that followed, Kestrel changed. The shield stayed up, its tuned hum becoming part of the settlement's background noise. Haulers rerouted to refuel at a station that now offered protection from micrometeors and raider storms. Traders came looking for the human and the ex-princess who built the impossible. Larixa handled the attention with a composure that would have made court scribes weep. This is the output node, she'd say, giving it to her. Please do not touch unless you wish to glow and collapse. Rian pretended to hate it. Next time they asked for a tour, he complained one morning as he wrestled a broken engine onto a lift. I'm charging admission. You already are, Larixa said, scrolling through incoming parts orders on a battered display. The increased traffic raised station tax revenue. The governor allocated a maintenance grant. It was either that or another statue of himself. Statues don't keep pirates out, Rian said. Unless you drop them on their ships. She considered this. We could design. Later, he cut in, amused. No weaponized vanity projects yet. A new sign appeared over the workshop door, this time a proper one, metal plate cut and etched by a grateful shipwright. Coal Kale Systems. Shields power weird problems welcome. Rian claimed it was too much. Larixa caught him polishing it at least twice. Maintenance, he said defensively. Of course, she replied. You are very devoted to proper sign hygiene. When she walked through the market now, people greeted her by name. Larixa, not High Scion, not Princess. Kids brought her broken gadgets to fix. She crouched to their height, large hands moving with surprising gentleness as she soldered wires back into place. "You are very big," one small child observed solemnly. "Yes," Larixa said. "Bigger than your governor's ego." "Do not tell him I said so." The child laughed like she told the funniest joke in the galaxy. Rian watched from a distance sometimes, leaning against a stall. She fit, he thought. Not by shrinking herself to slot into someone else's outline, but by existing at full size and letting the world rearrange. The message from the Illyrian Science Guild arrived on a sleek courier drone that had no business landing on Kestrel's dusty pad. Larixa caught it before it collided with a fuel barrel, plucked the capsule from its compartment, and activated the holo. An elderly Illyrian scholar flickered into the air, wearing the kind of expression Rian associated with people who just realized the universe was more complicated than their textbooks. "To engineer Larixa Kale and mechanic Rian Cole," the recording began. Rian choked. "They called me mechanic like it's a real title." "It is," Larixa said absently, eyes scanning the text streaming beside the image. The guild formally requested licensing rights to their hybrid shield design. They offered credit, royalties, and a place in the official archives as originators of the Cole harmonization model. "They laughed at this concept," Larixa murmured. "In council. They called it fantasy. Said I was indulging in wishful thinking." "And now?" Rian asked. She looked up, green eyes shining. "Now they ask permission," she said softly. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "We can tell them to eat vacuum." She smiled faintly. "No. Let them use it. Let it protect people who will never know my name. That will irritate my father far more than any refusal." Rian grinned. "You're diabolical. I like it. You like anything that makes authority figures squirm," she said. "Guilty," he replied. They signed the contract. Within months, reports began trickling in. Outposts on the edge of Illyrian space installing hybrid shields. Human colonies trading designs back across networks that had once been almost entirely one way. News feeds from the core world showed something Rian had not expected. Public debate. Illyrian commentators argued not about Larixa's body, though the gossip feeds tried, but about the break from purity standards in engineering and aesthetics. There were images of statues being quietly removed from squares, replaced by murals of workers of all shapes, sizes, and densities. "You started something," Rian said one night, scrolling through a feed showing Illyrian youths protesting outside a sculptor's guild hall. Their signs bore slogans in 2 languages. Larixa watched, expression complex. "We," she corrected. "You gave me the first proof that I was allowed to exist without apology. After that, the math took over." "Math?" he echoed. "Of course. It is simple," she said. "Change one variable, perception of worth, and the entire equation alters." A year after the first shield hummed to life over Kestrel, a small beacon blinked on the horizon. "Transspatial relay," Larixa said, squinting. "Origin Illyrian Prime." Rian handed her the receiver. "Your turn." She activated it. Archon Kayla appeared again, but the man in the halo of light was not quite the same as before. He looked thinner. Threads of gray shimmered in his dark hair. Some of the hard edges in his face had softened, not with kindness, but with time. "Larixa," he said. He didn't call her daughter. He also didn't call her excess. "I have seen the reports," he said. "Your model has stabilized our frontier defenses. Casualty projections have dropped by 19% in contested sectors." "Good," she said. "I did not call to praise you," he added quickly, as if the idea offended him at a cellular level. Rian muttered, "Then hang up." Larixa nudged him with her foot. "I cannot undo what I said," Kayla continued. "Nor what I did. Exile is not reversible. But I have altered the way heirs are assessed." He swallowed something that might, in a kinder man, have been regret. "No more will a child of my house be evaluated on mass and symmetry alone," he said. Performance metrics will be expanded. Larixa blinked. It wasn't an apology. It was, in its own twisted way, an admission. I was wrong enough that I had to change. Thank you, she said quietly. That is all I asked for, before you sent me away. That you see us as more than decoration. His gaze flicked beyond her, to the edges of the workshop, the faint outline of Rian in the background, arms folded. You will not return, he said. It was not quite a question. No, she replied. My work is here. My life is here. His jaw tightened. At least, he said, you have made something that matters. The transmission cut before she could answer. Rian whistled. High praise. It is all I will get, she said. It's enough? He asked. She considered, then nodded. Yes, she said. Because I do not need his approval to know my value anymore. I have other metrics. Such as? She stepped close, tugged at his shirt, and kissed him until the relay lights stopped blinking. Such as this, she murmured against his mouth. I measure my life in the people who see me clearly. That's a dangerous standard, he said. Means I have to keep paying attention. She smiled. Good. Stay awake, human. Kestrel declared a festival. They'd never had one before. The station's idea of celebration had always been, we didn't die this week, here's a drink. But the governor, who had discovered he enjoyed being protected by more than luck, pushed through the plan with unusual enthusiasm. The first anniversary of the Shield Grid's activation became Shield Day. Rian thought the name was uninspired, but he showed up anyway. Colorful strips of fabric hung between pylons. Kids painted their faces in blue and teal. Someone built a tiny, terrible replica of the Archon out of scrap and then stuck it on a target range. Larixa pretended not to see that part. Come on, Rian said, dragging her toward the makeshift stage in the central square. We have to flip the switch. There is a fully automated cycle, she protested. It does not need. It's symbolic, he said. Humans love symbolism. You helped ruin one empire's idea of what a princess is. Now you get to start a new tradition. Stop complaining. He pressed a lever into her hand. The new model's tied into half the station systems, he murmured. Give it a pull. She looked out at the crowd. Faces turned up toward her, human, Illyrian, and 3 other species whose names she was still learning. There was no sneer there. No calculation. Just anticipation. Larixa took a breath. Pulled. The shield surged. Lights arced up the pylons, exploded across the dome in patterns of gold and teal. Fireworks launched from the scrapyard, bursting against the barrier in showers of harmless sparks. The crowd roared, the sound echoing off hulls and rock. Do you hear it? She asked Rian, eyes shining. Hear what? He shouted over the noise. The sound of a world deciding not to be small anymore, she said. He looked at her, really looked, and thought, yeah. That about covered it. He slipped an arm around her waist. Happy Shield Day, Engineer Kale, he said. Happy not dying in Vacuum Day, Mechanic Cole, she answered. Their life, for all the ridiculous headlines and distant politics, settled into something beautifully ordinary. Morning started with the hiss of the coffee machine and Larixa muttering about calibration curves while Rian hunted for whatever tool he'd misplaced last. You stole my spanner again, he'd accuse. I relocated it for optimal efficiency, she'd counter, handing it over. They argued about tool placement, about parameter tolerances, about which song made the generator run happier. The generator, notably, had no opinion. Afternoons were repair calls. Starters that needed coaxing back to life. Cracked hulls. Haulers who'd tried to run without maintenance, and now paid the price. Larixa rode in the back of the rattling repair rover, legs taking up more than half the space, laughing whenever the shocks failed. You are enjoying this too much, Rian would grumble, hitting another pothole. I enjoy functional chaos, she'd reply. And you? He pretended not to hear the last part sometimes. Other times, he kissed her knuckles and almost drove into a crate. Nights were their own. Sometimes they sat on the roof, watching ships come and go under the shield's faint shimmer. Sometimes they sprawled on the too small couch upstairs, Lyrix's body all but enveloping Rian's, hollow screens casting soft light over their faces as they scrolled through news from a galaxy they were accidentally helping reshape. Look, she'd say, pointing at an article about a dense-bodied Illyrian model leading a new fashion campaign. They call her robust. No one sneers. Told you, he'd say. Robust is hot. Your preferences are deeply strange, she'd reply, smiling. He'd tuck himself closer against her and think, strange, maybe. But right. One quiet evening, after a long day of fixing a freighter that had clearly lost an argument with an asteroid field, Rian slumped in his chair and watched Lyrixa at the workbench. She was tinkering with a small device, a palm-sized version of their shield core, if he was reading the schematics right. You ever think about what's next? He asked. She didn't look up. Next, I complete this model and test whether it can stabilize individual suits in vacuum. I meant bigger picture, he said. We built the shield. Changed a few laws. Gave your father an ulcer. What's chapter 2 of Mechanic and former princess accidentally start movement? She set the tool down, finally turning. Next, she said. We keep building things that make it easier for people to exist. That's it? He asked. Yes, she said. That's everything. He tilted his head. You don't want a palace somewhere? Title restored? Fancy parties where everyone pretends they're not miserable? She wrinkled her nose. I have a workshop, a partner, and a galaxy full of broken systems. Why would I trade that for marble? Flattering, he said dryly. You just grouped me with broken systems. You are the most complicated thing I fix, she said, stepping close. She pressed a kiss to his forehead, then the tip of his nose, then his mouth, lingering. You mend machines, she murmured. But sometimes you mend people without realizing it. He caught her hand, held it against his cheek. Yeah, he said. Turns out it's addictive. Far above Kestrel, ships slipped in and out of warp, their drives synced to a shared signal, a pulse pattern that had started as a joke between a disgraced heir and a sarcastic mechanic, then become the official identifier of the harmonized shield network. On Illyrian Prime, statues were being quietly stored. New murals went up, engineers with heavy shoulders, pilots with thick waists, nobles with bodies that would once have been whispered about, now painted like saints of gravity. No one credited Rian directly. That was fine. He hated cameras. Everyone knew Lyrix's name. She didn't need them to. Not anymore. In the workshop, the hum of machines blended with the low murmur of music. Lyrixa lay on the couch, half asleep. Rian sprawled on her like a cat who hadn't realized he was smaller. Hey, he said, voice sleep rough. Quick philosophical question. She cracked an eye. You always ask philosophical questions when I am comfortable. Proceed. You remember the first day? He asked. When you landed in here looking like you were about to either cry or break my tools? I recall wanting to do both, she said. Back then, he said. If I told you that in a year you'd have changed your empire's laws and turned this dust ball into a hub, what would you have said? That you were concussed, she replied. He chuckled. Fair. She studied him for a long moment. What about you? She asked. If I had told you that a woman your empire called excess would fall into your workshop and become this much of your life, what would you have said? He smiled, soft and a little stunned. I'd have asked what I did to deserve that kind of luck. Silence stretched between them, warm and full. You are still too much, she said at last. For you? He asked. For anyone who thinks small, she said. For me, you are exactly calibrated. He reached up, traced one of the silver lines glowing under her skin. You know what still blows my mind? He asked. How little it took to start all this. She raised a brow. Little? Yeah, he said. One person showing up, being dumped somewhere they weren't wanted. One other person deciding not to treat them like trash. That's it. Everything else, dominoes. Larixa thought of her father's slightly softer eyes in the relay. Of guild halls arguing about standards. Of kids on kestrel painting shields in art class and calling them kale domes, like it was a normal term. Humans are dangerous, she said. You make revolutions out of kindness. Yeah, he said. We're weird that way. She brushed her thumb over his cheek. Rian, she said. You know, do you not, that even if the shields failed, even if the guild rescinded its praise, even if my father turned the sky red in anger, I would still choose this. This? He asked, teasing. The leaky roof? The coffee machine that screams? My terrible music taste? Yes, she said simply. You. Me. This place. The way I feel in my own skin when I am here. He swallowed past the sudden tightness in his throat. Then we're good, he said. Because all of that, the broken stuff, the loud stuff, the too much, that's not going anywhere. Outside, the shield flickered as a small meteor skated across its surface, then dissipated into harmless light. Inside, Larixa and Rian lay tangled on a couch that really should have been replaced months ago, listening to the heartbeat of machines and the quieter rhythm of two lives that had collided and decided to stick. Somewhere, a news feed voice droned about. The Harmony Standard. And new metrics of worth in Illyrian culture. Somewhere else, a kid on a distant world watched a plump Illyrian engineer step onto a stage and thought, for the first time, maybe I don't have to shrink. In the end, no crown decreed it. No army enforced it. The galaxy tilted a little towards something kinder because, in a grimy workshop on a forgotten outpost, a human looked at an alien everyone else had called too much and said, with absolute certainty, "You're enough." Exactly like this. And the universe, very slowly, began to agree. The end. If stories like that are your kind of trouble, where humans break old rules with stubborn compassion, stick around. There are a lot more broken things out there waiting to be turned into miracles.